Arguably, Dr. Venture is the main character of the Venture Brothers, despite the fact that the show is named after his sons. Dr. Venture is a bit of a prick throughout the series, with the magnitude and brand of his prickiness fluctuating with the seasons. He can be a narcissist, he is an occasionally competent scientist, and he is most certainly an adult man damaged by his own childhood. This is the story of Dr. Thaddeus Rusty Venture. We see numerous flashbacks to Dr. Venture as a boy of a certain age, but the chronology of those flashbacks is pretty unclear. What we do know is that Dr. Venture was repeatedly put in harm's way as a byproduct of growing up with and adjacent to his father in the original Team Venture. There was also a cartoon made based on his adventures. It's revealed in Season 7 that just like Hank and Dean, he's died and been cloned at least once, but probably a bunch of times. As a young man, he attended State University, where his roommate was Brock Sampson, and he was in a social circle with Pete White, Baron Underbite, and Mike Soriyama. When his father died, he left the school. Shortly afterward, he attended the fictitious Spanakopita Festival, which he would attend on a yearly basis from that point forward. In the next handful of years, he would have 3 sons. One of those sons was Dermot Fichtel, born to Nikki Fichtel, the underage president of the Rusty Venture fan club. Dr. Venture was forbidden from seeing her again and wouldn't meet Dermot until much later in life. His other 2 sons were, of course, Hank and Dean, who were born to an actress named Bobby St. Simone. How Dr. Venture ended up raising them on his own hasn't been clarified. Prior to the birth of Hank and Dean, Dr. Venture had a bodyguard named Myra Brandish, who became somewhat obsessive and had to be removed from her position. She was replaced by Brock Sampson, who would work with Dr. Venture for the next 16-ish years. When the show begins, Dr. Venture is a special kind of asshole. Write down the characteristics of a shitty person, pull a bunch from a hat, and you've probably described him. He's addicted to diet pills, he has little reverence for human life, he's sarcastic, he's narcissistic, he doesn't seem to care much about his sons, and in fact seems to really only care about himself. Of course, separated from actually having to know him in real life, we the audience can take joy from watching all of his bad behavior. Throughout the seasons, Dr. Venture very slowly becomes a little less terrible and a little more of a human being. The diet pill habit is slowly phased out of the show, and it barely gets mentioned again after Season 2, but it never had any real bearing on the plot or his character anyway. He is eventually shown to care about his sons, and occasionally he even acts fatherly toward them. The shift in Dr. Venture's character is perhaps most evident in Season 4, when a lot of characters were going through some big changes. Dr. Venture's big change was less noticeable because basically it was from being a prick 95% of the time to being a prick maybe 75% of the time. Throughout the series, there were a few notable moments when Dr. Venture wasn't an asshole. In the Season 3 episode Orb, Dr. Venture gets excited by the search for the orb in a way he hasn't since he was young, and ultimately in the same episode displays some actual scruples by choosing not to activate the orb. In Season 4's Bright Light Scene City, he reveals himself to have some musical talent and the creative drive to write a musical, even if it is motivated by narcissism. In Season 5's Spanakopita, we see Dr. Venture at his happiest and most carefree, though he's still a bit of a prick. And in the Season 7 episode, The Inamorata Consequence, we see Dr. Venture actually being the most mature person in a room full of top-level guild and OSI members. I was continually surprised while writing this whatever you want to call it video essay thing. First, because I thought this would have to be really long to cover all of Dr. Venture's past and his present, but the fact of the matter is that Dr. Venture can kind of be summed up: shitty childhood, shitty adult. Second, I'm surprised by how much I like a guy who I've called a prick or an asshole 9 times so far in 9 paragraphs. I think the reason we like Dr. Venture despite his asshole prick status is because we understand that his father was way worse, and it makes us excuse his behavior just a little bit. Also, I've talked about this a bit in the past, but I was a Venture Brothers fan from day one, but I didn't truly fall in love with the show until I saw the Season 3 episode, The Doctor is Sin. See, I was having myself a bit of an identity crisis back in 2008, in which I was continually asking myself, am I a bad person? And after Dr. Venture realized Dr. Killinger was trying to make him into a supervillain, he asked Brock, am I a bad person? And that was the little bit of emotional connection I needed to completely fall in love with this show. Ever since that moment, I've sort of been rooting for Dr. Venture, and every tiny little moment in which he displays his humanity is one of my favorite moments in the show. I recently turned to Reddit to ask the question, do you think a young Rusty Venture provided his own voice for the Rusty Venture show? And the answers were pretty inconclusive. Whether or not he did, though, doesn't really matter. He was something of a child star either way, and that alone is enough to screw up an adult. Throw in a shitty dad with shitty friends.
Not today, Rusty. Not today.
Constantly being in dangerous situations as a kid and an adult, and quite frankly, it's a miracle Dr. Venture isn't way worse than he is. Dr. Venture may be a prick, Dr. Venture may be an asshole, but can you really blame the guy? Tune in next week for my video essay about Dr. Orpheus. Have a great week, and go Team Venture.